And he said on the way the scene on the streets was unbelievable. There were severed limbs, severed human limbs lying. Houses were torched. Some of these limbs had been burnt and the stench was unbearable. We had to go through that in that veritable hell for more than an hour until we reached the medical college hospitals. Fortunately, we found Nur Muhammad's wife was unhurt. So we picked her up and then we drove back to wherever Ashok Mitra was posted and Nur Muhammad was posted. And well, that was that. It is a great honor and also a matter of pleasure for me to speak on a subject which is very dear to my heart and which I have been researching for many years. See, in West Bengal, the cultural ethos was suffused by communist thinking, and the communists, as well as the Congress, they always tried to hide these communal disturbances or Hindu-Muslim cases under a cover so that people did not get to know about them. I think that is a very dishonest way to do things because history should never be hidden. And there is a saying by the Spanish philosopher George Santayana that those who forget their history are condemned to repeat it. You would get an idea of how far hidden the history of the exodus of Hindus from East Pakistan is as compared to that of West Pakistan. Because on the western, that is the Punjabi exodus, Punjab partition, there are a large number of books. There are books by both fiction and non-fiction, by Khushwant Singh, by G.S. Khosla, by Penderal Moon, by Sadat Hasan Manto on the other side of the border, and several others. I think there must be at least no less than 20 books on the subject, plus motion pictures and all that. As opposed to that, about the eastern exodus of Hindus, that is exodus from East Bengal, there are very few books and practically none in English or Hindi, so that they are barred to the All India audience. There are 3 or 4 in Bengali, which are not accessible to the All India audience. Only the first complete book, so to say, was written by yours truly. That is a book titled My People Uprooted. I shall presently show you that book, but before that, a few others have taken up that book. This is the book that I wrote, and it contains, among other things, a description of the subject of today's talk, that is the Great Calcutta Killings of 1946. You see, the Great Calcutta Killings began in a very interesting way. If we are to believe Maulana Abul Kalam Azad, as he has recorded in his autobiography, India Wins Freedom, it began with an act of Jawaharlal Nehru. See, this book of Maulana Azad was published after his death, but not the whole book. He had willed that 30 pages of this book would be published 30 years later. And therefore, although he died in 1957, the 30 pages were published in, it could be 30 pages or lesser number of pages. They were published in 1987. Now, according to this book, uh, the last pages of the book, there was a British high power committee called the Cabinet Mission, which had come to India in 1946, whose intention was to grant independence to India without dividing India. So Muslim League was all along agitating for dividing India, but at that time the British government was not in favor of dividing India, and they wanted to give independence to India without dividing it. So the Muslim League conferred with the leaders of different parties, Congress and Muslim League, of course, and all other parties also, Hindu Mahasabha, Akali Party, all these. And eventually they formed a plan called the grouping plan. Now, I'm not going to go into the details of the grouping plan. It's quite complicated. But according to the grouping plan, there would be a weak center, strong states, and the country would remain undivided. Now, this grouping plan was agreed to by both the Congress and the Muslim League. Muslim League, I believe, did it reluctantly, but whatever. But at that time, Maulana Azad was the president of the Indian National Congress. He handed over his mantle to Jawaharlal Nehru. He has said that I meant to hand it over to Sardar Patel, but because of certain circumstances, I had to hand it over to Jawaharlal Nehru, and Jawaharlal Nehru made a horrible mistake or intentional or whatever. On the 10th of July 1946, he held a press conference in Bombay, then Mumbai, now Mumbai, when he said that this grouping plan is not going to work, and we are going to enter the Constituent Assembly without ourselves feeling fettered by any kind of previous agreements. In other words, he was negating the acceptance of the grouping plan, which was earlier on agreed by the Congress and the Muslim League. Now, Jinnah was under some pressure within his party, within the Muslim League, for having accepted this plan. So Jinnah saw this opportunity, and he said that the Hindus can't be trusted. I knew this was going to happen. So now we are going to withdraw the acceptance to the Cabinet Mission's grouping plan. And that was the end of undivided India. And he also announced that he was going to have a direct action sometime. He didn't mention when, he didn't mention where, and he didn't mention what form this direct action was going to take. So this raised a lot of questions. The newspaperman asked him, is this direct action is going to be, sir, is it going to be violent or non-violent? Jinnah said, I am not going to discuss ethics. And after that, he said nothing. But the direct action was being put into action by the governor or by the government of undivided Bengal, the premier of which was Surawardi of Hussain Shahid Surawardi of the Muslim League. During that time, after 1937, the provincial governments were being run by elected governments of parties belonging to Indians, but with a British governor at top. The British governor for Bengal was a person called Sir Frederick Burrows, just as the British governor of Punjab at that time was one Sir Evan Jenkins. Now, what had happened is that people started a lot of speculation about what this direct action was going to be like. And a lot of people made fun of direct action also. But nobody said anything clearly about it. Only once or twice something came out in some papers here and there in Calcutta, which gave an indication that this direct action was going to be enacted in Calcutta, and it was not going to be a very tame affair. But people still log maja udate the. What is this direct action? Let us see. We wish all, even Hindus were saying, we all wish we success to the direct action. But some people, like say for instance, at that time Calcutta had a mayor called Hassan Usman. He had let out a handbill which said that we are going to embark on the direct action. The call of this has come from Quaid-e-Azam Muhammad Ali Jinnah. This is the ambition of every Muslim to fight with an open bared sword, and if we die here, we'll straight go to heaven, etc., and we'll get our hoors, etc., etc., all these things. But nobody still took him seriously. Suravardi, who was the premier at that time, he declared a holiday on the 16th of August. There was some hullabaloo in the state assembly, the provincial assembly, as to why he was declaring a holiday. But he didn't listen to anyone, he declared a holiday. On the 16th of August morning, there was a huge gathering in Calcutta Maidan. Calcutta has a huge Maidan. Those of you who are familiar with the city would know. And that Maidan is used to hold very mammoth meetings. So in this meeting, this Suravardi addressed the gathering. The gathering consisted almost absolutely entirely of Muslims who had come not only from Calcutta but the adjoining areas, including the jute mill laborers. And strangely, they had come all with lethal weapons. Like some had come with spears, some had come with swords, some had come with stones. Some who had guns, they came with guns and all that. Now, how did they get to know that such a thing was necessary? This was done entirely by word of mouth. There was no public declaration. One or two things like that statement by Usman I mentioned, that was there, but no very clear declaration as to what form this thing was going to take. Now, Suravardi, in that meeting at the Calcutta Maidan, he announced that the day for direct action has arrived. Before that, Jinnah had said one thing. He had said, today we bid goodbye to all constitutional methods. We have forged a pistol and we are in a position to use it. That is all he said. Now, Suravardi said in the meeting, Jinnah was not present in the meeting. Suravardi said in the meeting that you are now called upon to undertake direct action, and most importantly, I have asked the police and the military not to interfere. Now, what does that mean? Not to interfere in what? Not to interfere in murder and mayhem. And that is what he had actually instructed the police. He had also played with the police officials so that at the very top, there was a police official called Muhammad Shamsud Doha, who was MS Doha, who was Suravardi's direct henchman. And with these things, that direct action started. First, they started looting shops, including a gun shop. picked up a lot of guns. Then they started going all over town and killing Hindus. Now, Hindus were not prepared for it because there was no warning, nothing was mentioned, there was no news about it, as I mentioned. So Hindus just started dying like flies. People who had never suspected that their neighbor would attack them were surprised, and then the surprise didn't last very long because they died. They were stabbed immediately thereafter. In the Muslim areas where there were pockets of Hindus, they were all summarily killed. There was a small pocket of Odias in a place in a totally Muslim area called Metiaburus. In this Metiaburus area, that small Odia pocket had some 300 or 400 Odias. And the Odias had been warned by the police to clear out of that place, but the Odias didn't do it. They paid no heed to it. They were killed off in 10 minutes. So 300 or 400 Odias, they were killed off. The simple laborers killed off in 10 minutes. This happened. This went on over the whole city. Governor Barros, it is said, he went out in a police car, toured the whole of the city, and he decided that it was not necessary to call out the military. You can imagine how biased this Governor Barros was in favor of the Muslim League. And then this went on. This went on for the whole of the 16th. People died like flies. Houses, Hindu houses were set on fire. Hindu boatmen on the river, they were rammed by Muslim boatmen in their motor launches and sunk, and in every possible way they were killed. Some little pockets, there was some sanity among the people, and the Muslims did not indulge in this kind of murder and mayhem, but they were very few and far between, and it's mostly the one story of murder and mayhem. The same thing continued the next day on the 17th. But meanwhile, the Hindus had started organizing because they realized that this is not a situation in which ahimsa is going to work. Ahimsa is all right against the British, but ahimsa was not going to work. It doesn't work against the Taliban. It doesn't work against any kind of any marauders, and certainly it was not going to work here. So they got organized, and the lead was given, you'd be surprised to know, by the Sardarjis. There were at that time a large number of Sardars in Calcutta who were mostly in the transport business. In fact, the entire transport network, particularly the bus network, was run by Sardars. In addition to that, there were the Bihari Kalwars. Kalwars are ironmongers. In one particular area, they usually have the name of Jaiswal. These Jaiswals, they also got together with the Sardars. And of course, there were Bengali Hindus, a very large number of them, who were led by one Gopal Patha. Gopal Patha actually means a goat. Gopal Patha was a butcher who had a butcher's shop in which jhatka meat was sold. Gopal Patha, his name was Gopal Mukherjee, but he was a Brahmin. But he was named Gopal Patha because he was slaughtering pathas. So these groups, they got together and they started retaliating. And Sohrawardi never thought that Hindus would be able to retaliate, because then he thought that these are Mahatma Gandhi's chelas. They believe in ahimsa. They won't be able to do anything. So we would be able to conquer the whole city, and the whole of Calcutta would go to Pakistan. That was the main intention. See, that time Calcutta was not the lackluster or third city or fourth city of India. It was a very thriving city, the fountainhead of all commercial and industrial, particularly industrial activity in India. And the city was inhabited by people from various parts of India. It was said to be the second city in the British Commonwealth after London. In terms of population, at least it was the second city. Bombay was far behind. So Calcutta was chosen as the stage for this direct action, and it process started. Now, on the second day evening, the Hindus started retaliating, and on the third day, from the third day, the Hindus and the Sikhs, they started retaliating with such ferocity that this person, Suravardi, could never imagine they were capable of this ferocity. He had all along thought that these people, Mahatma Gandhi ke chele hain, they are followers of Ahimsa, they will just put their necks forward and we will chop off their necks, nothing more to be done about it. But the Muslim areas began to be torched, the Muslims began to be killed, and by that time, Suravardi was forced to bring out the British troops. At that time, there were a lot of British troops in Calcutta and the Indian troops also. The police force was manned by Anglo-Indians to a large extent. These Anglo-Indians also sat just watching, mute watchers. They were also told to move. And this retaliation went on the 18th and 19th. And by 19th, it's not a very nice thing to say, but the Hindus and Sikhs, they had evened the score, more than even the score, with the result that one of the very authentic descriptions of the great Calcutta killings has mentioned that Suravardi was sitting in the police control room in a very forlorn mood and holding his hand, holding the forehead in his hand and mumbling to himself, my poor innocent Muslims, my poor innocent Muslims. Nobody wants the Muslims to be killed, but they began the process. So that was that. And in this process, the thing gradually stopped on the 19th. Now, one of the chroniclers of this great Calcutta killings was a person called Ashok Mitra. Ashok Mitra was an ICS officer. There are actually two Ashok Mitras. One was an economist who was also a communist, and the other one was an ICS officer who later on became the Census Commissioner of India. This Ashok Mitra has written an autobiography. He had, in his autobiography, he has mentioned that he was at that time posted in somewhere just outside Calcutta. At that time, he had an underling called some Muslim person, Nur Muhammad or something like that, his name. This Nur Muhammad's wife had been hospitalized in a Calcutta hospital. And Nur Muhammad was going mad with worry about his wife, what had happened to his wife. So he said that he went and caught hold of Ashok Mitra's feet and he said that, sir, you must do something. What could the poor fellow do? They are ICS officer or anything. Nobody had the power to do anything against this organized mayhem. But Ashok Mitra said, right now, nothing is possible. After the riots abate, we'll see what we can do. Then they started out in a car. His driver flatly refused. He said, I can't go to Calcutta. I won't go to Calcutta. So you can sack me or you can do whatever you like. Then Ashok Mitra himself drove the car. And he said on the way, the scene on the streets was unbelievable. There were severed limbs, severed human limbs lying. Houses were torched. Some of these limbs had been burnt and the stench was unbearable. We had to go through that in that veritable hell for several for more than an hour until we reached the medical college hospitals. Fortunately, we found Nur Muhammad's wife was unhurt. So we picked her up and then we drove back to wherever Ashok Mitra was posted and Nur Muhammad was posted. And well, that was that. Other chroniclers of the riots, I'll mention Stanley Wolpert. Stanley Wolpert was an American researcher into several subjects concerning India. He has written a biography of Jinnah, which is called the Jinnah of Pakistan. It's a must-read book for anyone who is interested in the history of India during that period. He has mentioned that at that time he had no, it was he or Ashok Mitra, one of the two. They had mentioned that there was a British general called Sir Francis Tucker. This Sir Francis Tucker and Suravardi once they had occasion to travel together in a car in Calcutta before the riot started. And at that time there was this atmosphere of tension between Hindus and Muslims. And this Francis Tucker, General Francis Tucker, he said that I find this very strange. Because in the army, we have both Hindus and Muslims. Remember, that was the undivided Indian army. In the army, we have Hindus and Muslims, and they all work shoulder to shoulder. Suravardi said, we'll put a stop to that, don't you worry. You can imagine what sort of an attitude they had. So, among the other things, this person, Stanley Wolpert. Stanley Wolpert has described the attitudes of Englishmen. I have already mentioned what the attitude of Governor Burrows was. Then there was the main garrison, army garrison in the middle of Calcutta is in a fort called Fort William. The officer commanding in the Fort William was one Brigadier J.P.C. McKinley. This J.P.C. McKinley, he told his troops that you can go to sleep. You don't have anything to do. That was on the first day of the riot. So no policemen came out. The second day, towards the evening, when things started going bad for the Muslims, then Suravardi called out the troops. Some Indian troops came out, some British troops came out, but British troops came out in large numbers only towards the very end of the riots. And when they came out, they were surprised at the ferocity with which the two communities have killed each other. Unbelievable. Now, the thing to understand in this is that not who killed whom, but number one is who started this whole business. They were very cynical people. Muhammad Ali Jinnah, he thought nothing of sending some thousands of his own people to hell only to get his own Pakistan. Not only that, he corrupted, he prostituted the entire governmental machinery to subserve his nefarious needs, mainly to stage the riot and to kill Hindus. Suravardi did the same, and they did not reckon with the fact that Calcutta was a Hindu majority city. They all along thought that these are ahimsa, Gandhiji's chelas, they will not be able to retaliate. So this, in short, is a very short history of the Calcutta riots. It's a very, very sad chapter in the history of India, particularly those days immediately before and immediately after partition. As a matter of fact, this great Calcutta killings, also known as the direct action, were a blot on the city, where before that there were no major riots. There were killings, stabbings, that sort of thing, but there were no major riots. And generally, the relations between the two communities had been good. But after that, the relations got poisoned, and a lot of Muslims left for East Pakistan, but many of them came back after what is known as the Nehru-Liaquat Pact of 1950. Now that is a different chapter altogether. I don't want to go into it. But so far as this direct action day or 16th August is concerned, this is more or less. Oh, one thing I must add. Very, very strangely, the present West Bengal government, under the chief ministership of Mamata Banerjee, has decided to observe this day as Khela Hobe. Khela Hobe is a slogan. Khela Hobe means Kheloga. So Khela Hobe is a slogan that these people had used. They had borrowed it from some Bangladeshi politician, and they had used this slogan in the 2021 elections, in which they won with a thumping majority on the 2nd of May 2021, and that their victory was to a large extent due to the mismanagement of the elections by the BJP itself. BJP was the second party, but the elections were so badly mismanaged by the BJP that they almost got a walkover. So choosing for her to choose this horrible day, this 16th of August, as her Khela Hobe Diwas is very curious and very intriguing. A lot of us have objected to it. I don't know what made her do it. She has not given any explanation. I'll leave it at that. Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity, and wish you all a very happy Independence Day, which we had today. Vande Mataram, Jai Hind, Bharat Mata ki Jai.
I would like to read something, what Dr. B.R. Ambedkar wrote in his book about Muslim politics. He said Muslim politics is gangsters' method of politics. And then H.V. Sheshadri has amplified the same point when he said that the Muslim political behavior revolves around acrimony, accusations, complaints, demands, denunciations, and finally street rioting. And this is followed by playing the victim. He says this is a practiced routine, and yet our leadership from say 1920s itself has always sought to dissemble or appease or bend and surrender to them. And this has become the hallmark right from the days of the Khilafat movement. This is Sanjay Dikshit's interpretation of it.
Yes, this is a very important observation, and I completely agree with what Ambedkar ji had said and what Sanjay Dikshit ji had said. You see, you mentioned the Khilafat movement. The Khilafat movement very little is known to the citizens of India today, because we are under some kind of obligation imposed, of course, by the so-called quote-unquote secular politicians and secular historians of India, like Romila Thapar, Bipan Chandra, Harbans Mukhia, all these people, that thou shalt not speak ill of the Muslims. Thou shalt not speak ill of the Muslims. A Muslim can do no wrong. Why is it? Just as a Hindu can do wrong, a Sikh can do wrong, a Muslim can also do wrong. So why shouldn't we speak? You see, this has come from Mahatma Gandhi's idea that the Hindu-Muslim unity has to be achieved at any cost. That is why in the Khilafat movement actually finally culminated in a pogrom of Hindus in the Malabar part of Kerala, at that time it was part of Madras Presidency, there was a wholesale killing of Hindus by the Mopala Muslims. It is called Mopala Rebellion, but it is not a rebellion, it's a Hindu killing. And Gandhiji tried to whitewash it by saying that they are very religious people, they have done what their religion tells them. Because your religion tells you to kill me, should I proffer my neck so that you can chop it off? I don't subscribe to that idea, however great Mahatma Gandhi may be and whatever. This is a totally wrong way of looking at it.
Sir, this is what happened here also in the great Calcutta killings. After 3 days, when the Hindus under Gopal Patha started retaliating, Gandhiji immediately came from North Lee and he asked him to pacify and to give up arms. And he rejected it on his face and walked away. Gopal Patha. And this is intriguing what you said about Khela Hobe, because last week we had somebody called Fuad Chaudhary from Dhaka who spoke about the 1971 pogrom, that the genocide that Pakistan did in Bangladesh.
Yes.
And in that he showed, in his documentary, he has roped in many expatriate Pakistanis who were then a part of it. And one of the ex-Pakistan army persons said that yes, when the genocide began in Bangladesh, he said, I got a call from my colleague. He said, yeah, the fun has begun. So, to use words as khela, to use words as fun.
This brings me to a very important thing that I can't help mentioning. We all know about Jallianwala Bagh. Jallianwala Bagh is said to be an enormous, horrendous massacre of unarmed people. I think some 1,400 people were killed in it. There is a place called Chuknagar, now in Bangladesh, hardly 40 kilometers from the Indian border, where there was a similar massacre by the Pakistani army of unarmed Hindus, mostly women and children. And do you know how many people were killed in one day? 10,000 people were killed in one day. The waters of the local river, they ran red. Unbelievable. And Pakistan army, who were shooting, they ran out of ammunition, then they bayoneted these people, then they trampled them with cars, and horrible, it's beyond description. The name of the place is Chuknagar, by a Bangladeshi author called Muntasir Mamun. He has written about it very feelingly, and his writing is in English. I would recommend to everyone. Jallianwala Bagh was horrible, but this Jallianwala Bagh pales in insignificance compared to Chuknagar mass murder. Thank you. Please go ahead.
Sir, is it ironic or is it unfortunate that we, on the other part of the country, haven't even heard of this? This is news to me, what you're telling now.
Yes, I'll tell you the reason why. The reason is that this entire cultural ethos of West Bengal has been suffused, has been overshadowed by Marxists and Congressites who have all along been saying that this is, thou shalt not speak ill of the Muslims. And it is because of that that this thing is not done. That is why I would recommend that this poor man, this book that he has written, if any of you will kindly buy it and read it. I mean, apart from the fact that it will get me a little bit of money, but it really contains a lot of information which is not available anywhere else.
There is a name of the road in Calcutta by the name of Suhalwardi. Is it of the same butcher of Bengal or somebody else?
See, I am not very sure about the answer to this question, because there were 4 notable Surawardis, all of the same family, and not all 4 were villains. The eldest Surawardi was one Sir Z.R. Zahid Surawardi, was a non-political person. He was a judge of the Calcutta High Court. Then there were two Hassan Surawardis. One Hassan Surawardi was the elder brother of this Hussein Surawardi. And this one Hassan Surawardi, he was an art critic. He eventually went to Pakistan, but he was not a communal person. The other Hassan Surawardi was Dr. Hassan Surawardi, who was the vice chancellor of a university. These were all non-political persons. It is only the Hussein Surawardi, Hussein Shahid Surawardi, who was the real villain, who was not just a villain, but he was also a horrible womanizer. If you read the Freedom at Midnight, that book by Dominic Lapierre and Larry Collins, you'd find a description of him. I am not very sure as to which Surawardi it is named after. I have tried to find out, but so far I have drawn a blank. I'll still keep on trying to find out. So I'm sorry, I can't answer your question.
Sir, can you please shed some light about the role of Mujibur Rahman in this direct action day?
Mujibur Rahman was the office secretary of the Muslim League at that time. So he definitely had something to do with the direct action. But what he did is unclear. He wasn't a very big wig. I mean, he wasn't one of the leaders. The main leader was Surawardi. Apart from that, there were other peoples like Abdullah Hil Baki, then Usman, SN Usman, and a few others. But Surawardi definitely had something to do. He has mentioned it also in his unfinished autobiography, which is in Bengali. And in that unfinished autobiography, of course, he has dished out a lot of things which are not literally believable, really believable. Say, for instance, there was a leader called Abul Hashim. He had said that this is Abul Hashim had told him, he was a junior man. So Abul Hashim was much senior. Abul Hashim apparently had told him that this fight is not against the Hindus, but against the British. It's all nonsense. I don't believe any of it. He was just sort of whitewashing it. But to give the devil his due, after he went back to East Pakistan, he became a changed person. He left the Muslim League. He started the Awami League. Surawardi also began the Awami League, and they tried to give some kind of safety to Hindus in East Pakistan. That wasn't worth much. It's more for show than anything else. So that was all about Sheikh Mujibur Rahman.
My question is about the Congress leaders. What was their role in all this? And also, what was Dr. Shyama Prasad Mukherjee's role? If you could shed some light on that.
Yes.
Thank you.
Good question. See, the Congress leaders, they were all followers of Mahatma Gandhi. So they could not say anything about any taking to arms or fighting them. So Congress leaders were just duds. They just sat there doing nothing. Dr. Shyama Prasad Mukherjee was not in power. The party in power was Muslim League, and they had an absolute majority in the state assembly. As a matter of fact, I mean, if I go back a little bit in history, in 1944, there was a Gandhi Jinnah talks, That was a very ill-advised thing that Gandhiji did, going over to Jinnah and trying to talk him into accepting some kind of compromise. He did it upon the advice of Chakraborty Rajagopalachari. But it was a very wrong thing to do because it put Jinnah in a light that, it projected to the whole of the country where Jinnah was the sole representative of Muslims. Before that, there were a lot of other people. Like, for instance, in Punjab, there was Sir Sikandar Hayat Khan, who used to lead a party called the Unionist Party. It was a very powerful party, and Sikandar Hayat Khan was a secular person. Then after him, there was Khizar Hayat Tiwana. and several other people here and there, Sir Choturam, all these people. But when Gandhiji went to Jinnah and showed to the country that in his view, Jinnah was the representative of all the Muslims in the country, all these parties broke and they all came and joined the Muslim League. So that was a very horrible thing to happen. And after that, there was no stopping, there was no stopping Jinnah. As for Dr. Shyama Prasad Mukherjee, after the riots had abated, he had lambasted Sohrawardy in the state assembly, and he had said that, you know, in Europe, there was a great massacre in France, there was a great massacre of Protestants by Catholics on a day called the St. Bartholomew's Day. And he had said that this is the Great Calcutta Killings was something in which the St. Bartholomew's Day pales into insignificance. He had mentioned this because this would be readily understandable to foreign journalists and all that. But he couldn't do anything much more because first thing is Hindu Mahasabha had a very small following. Hindu vote was entirely with the Congress, and the Congress did nothing. This is this is a sad fact.
Is total population exchange possible now, anyhow?
It's not possible. It's not possible. It was possible earlier, and in 1950, there was a bloody pogrom engineered by the East Pakistan government, after which Dr. Shyama Prasad Mukherjee had advocated an exchange of population. But earlier on, there was an exchange of population in Punjab. As a matter of fact, after January 1948, there was hardly any non-Muslim left in Pakistan. And in Indian Punjab, except for one small place called Malerkotla, there were no Muslims left anywhere. So there was exchange of population. But from elsewhere, the Muslims stayed put. So when Dr. Shyama Prasad Mukherjee raised this subject in 1950, by that time Nehru was much more firmly in saddle. Earlier on, Nehru could not do anything. As a matter of fact, he went to Mountbatten and he said, I can't manage this country, you take over. He went to that extent. But in 1950, he was much more firmly in saddle. So he said that, no, we can't do this. This is a matter of faith. The Muslims have reposed faith in us. They want to remain in India. That is nonsense. Nobody wants to leave his home and hearth if he can leave, if he can help it. The Muslims did not want to move, they did not move. Hindus also did not want to move, but they were forced to move from Pakistan. But Nehru gave a picture as if the Muslims are staying on in India only because of they are doing some kind of favor to India by staying on. So this was how Nehru rebuffed it, and he was at that time, Sardar Patel was very ill at that time. He died in another 6 months or 6 or 8 months. And Nehru was after that the uncrowned king of India. Whatever he said was law.
So talking about population exchange, there has been an author called Manto who has written very poignantly.
Sadat Hasan Manto.
Yes. Yes. He talks about, the mad people, pagals being exchanged from Pakistan.
That's right. That book, Toba takes in.
Yes. Yes. And he writes that I thought that the Hindus and Muslims would busy themselves in this war, and their blood, which did not mix in the mosque and in temple, their blood would finally mix in Bombay's gutters and drains. The original Sohrawardy was a Sufi of the 12th century and founded the Sufi order called Sohrawardiya. Could you please make a public note of this?
I'm not aware of this. It's quite possible.
Again, for the books Tathagatji has shown one book. My people approved it. He has written another book on Shyama Prasad Mukherjee.
Complete biography. I'll show it right away. This is that book. Okay. So this has come out in Penguin edition.
So would you say something about what I just shared, that today, even today, Hindus who are writing, say, anti-Muslim or are writing about this pogrom that you talked about, are being watched in West Bengal even today?
They are being watched, but so far there is a lot of persecution of people who have been speaking against the present government of West Bengal and against Mamata Banerjee. I had once made a Twitter remark on Twitter, as a result of which an FIR was lodged against me. But beyond that, nothing much had happened. Earlier on, once in 2011, I was put in prison for 1 day. For no reason, I was put on. At that time, I was just a retired professor of university. I was put in prison in charge on a charge of attempted murder. Can you believe it? But that is how the government here functions.
Tathagata has been controversial for his tweets because some retired army officer suggested that instead of this was after the Pulwama attack, when he said that boycott the Kashmiris, economically boycott them, stop buying from them, stop going there for tourism. And he retweeted that, and then he invited a lot of
That's right.
Would you like to share some more of this?
No, I have made a lot of controversial tweets. Some of them are more, some of them are less controversial. FIR was launched for it. I had mentioned that some temple was desecrated, and I had mentioned we are Hindus. On that, someone had launched an FIR. Of course, it was politically engineered. Nobody would, no ordinary person would go and lodge an FIR. On the other hand, there is a woman who had been pictured on Twitter trying to put on a condom on a shivling. I had filed an FIR, a police complaint against her, but nothing happened.
Sir, any changes in history textbooks possible in near future to depict the real history in place of the doctored history we read in school?
I understand some such thing is in progress. As a matter of fact, lately I've been hearing of a lot of these communists bleating that history is being changed. And I think there is something in the offing. I don't know the details. These are the Indian Council of Historical Research is the nodal body which does it.
What is the role of the center and BSF in the influx of Bangladeshis?
Yes, good question. You see, the border is policed by the BSF. And in spite of the BSF being there, and in spite of the larger part of the border between India and Bangladesh being fenced, still a lot of infiltration takes place and a lot of smuggling of cattle takes place from India to Bangladesh. Infiltration of humans from Bangladesh to India, infiltration and smuggling of cattle from India to Bangladesh. This is a very vexed question, particularly the cattle bit, because you'd be surprised to know where the cattle are coming from. West Bengal doesn't have that number of cattle. These cattle are coming from the area where people say, Gau hamari mata hai. They are coming from Rajasthan, Haryana, UP, all these places. When the cattle stop giving milk, then they sell them to Muslim butchers. And the Muslims send them to West Bengal, and then there's the big money being made in this business, in this smuggling business, and I need not say much more. As for the infiltration of the human beings, it is lessened to a great extent because of the fencing. Unfortunately, quite a lot of area cannot be fenced because it is riverine border. And you know, the rivers on this side are very big, very wide rivers, particularly in the southern part of the border, very wide rivers. So it is quite difficult to police those rivers. But to a large extent, it has been checked, infiltration. One more reason which has been checked is that the Modi ji has made a pact with Sheikh Hasina by which the enclaves have been exchanged. You know, a peculiar thing used to be there in the northern part of West Bengal, that there were certain pockets of Indian territory inside Bangladesh and pockets of Bangladeshi territory inside India. They were called enclaves. And the strangest thing is there was a pocket of Indian territory inside Bangladesh in which there was a pocket of Bangladeshi territory. So you can imagine what sort of a thing, but this has been ironed out, and this has, to a large extent, this has helped the infiltration. And also the fact that Bangladesh is progressing economically is one reason why people in India have also become a lot more conscious. Still, there are a very large number of Bangladeshi infiltrators in places like Bangalore, Bombay, in Delhi, in places like Simapuri and Silampur. They are still there. They, I think, just offhand, I would say they number no less than 10 lakhs. In West Bengal also there are a large number.
It says, Tathagata Babu, don't you see the same somnolence of Bengali Hindus nowadays too, aided by the high sense of Bengali identity?
See, the Bengali identity is something that the present government, particularly Mamata Banerjee, is trying to rub in. And she has succeeded to a certain extent, but it is to a very small extent. Because first thing, the Bengalis don't have any enmity towards people from any other part of India. Bengali Hindus don't have any kind of enmity, not even the language. See, Bengalis are very, very proud of the language, but they don't have any kind of allergy to Hindi as they have in Tamil Nadu. So there is no Bengali identity thing except among a very small number of people. As for the other thing that you mentioned, Bengali somnolence, I would say that it still persists. It's not completely gone.
We are talking about FIRs for controversial expressions. What is your position on Article 295A?
Article 295A? What is that?
It's about lodging FIRs for controversial expressions, I think.
See, lodging FIRs, let me have a look at it. Deliberate and malicious acts intended to outrage religious feelings of any class by insulting its religion or religious feelings. See, I can say with some justice that Hindus do not do it as a class. Hindus or Sikhs or Jains, no follower of Indic religions, even Christians, don't do it. It is only one class of people who do it. And it is done in certain parts of West Bengal where there are numerous, particularly in districts like Murshidabad or Malda. There have been desecration of Hindu temples. There have been harassment of Hindus, but takeover of Hindu lands, even Shamshan land, the land for cremation ghats, cremation ground. They have been forcibly grabbed. Such things happen over here.
Sir, what I want to find out is that with whatever historical facts you have presented, and there are many more where the so-called Muslim community has butchered and killed Hindus in different parts of the country historically. I mean, if we look at the history of last 1,000 years, it's replete with those kind of cases.
Yes.
even in the recent times after the election, whatever happened in Bengal, we have all seen that. And after that, if the chief minister of the state, say, oh, on this date, we are going to have a Khela Hobe day, right? And Khela Hobe, we all know where it has been picked up from. It has been picked up from Bangladesh, a specific party who is known for its violent nature. And they have demonstrated that as well on the street. It's not that it is just in air.
Yes.
Now, with all of that, is CM saying that what do you think now CM is saying it's the only person left over there is governor, and you happen to have played those roles not in that state but in other places. What do you think as a governor what one should do?
See, a governor, I have been governor for 5 years, and I have had quite a few tiffs with the state government. They have not come out in the open to the extent the problems between the West Bengal governor and the West Bengal government had come out. But I have had problems. In case of problems, the governor's roles is very limited. One thing that governor can do is he can block legislation. Secondly, he can bring the matter to the notice of the central government. When I was in Meghalaya, my Raj Bhavan was once gheraued by some 10,000 or 12,000 people because I had blocked the legislation. But I refused to unblock it because I said that this is not within the jurisdiction of the state to legislate. And eventually they went away. But it could have been very dangerous because the houses in Meghalaya are mostly made of wood. And if they had thrown a petrol bomb, the whole Raj Bhavan would have gone up in flames. So the governor can do precious little apart from that. He can only block legislation and stuff like that, not much more.
Is Hindu leadership confusion and lack of historical experience of Islam or failure to understand Islamic psychology, is that the cause of Hindus' deterioration in Republic of India?
I personally think so. I'm not speaking on behalf of my party because right now I'm not in any kind of position in the party, but I personally think and I agree with the questioner.
Could you please write a comprehensive book on the events that led to the Direct Action Day? This is a request to you.
That is a comprehensive book. See, I am not a professional historian. You must understand that. I am merely a history buff and one who got very interested in history. So this ought to be written by a professional historian, and the ICHR, Indian Council of Historical Research, must take it up. But I must tell you, since you've given me this opportunity to tell you why and how I became a history buff. I'm a civil engineer of all things by profession and by training. But when I was in college, Bengal Engineering College in 1964, some 10, 15 students from the East Pakistan University of Engineering and Technology, they came and enrolled in our class. Now, in an engineering college, it is most unusual for people to come in at 4th year. I was in 4th year. So I talked to them and I found out that the sort of persecution, torture and harassment that they had been subjected to was unbelievable. At that time it was East Pakistan. Bangladesh time is somewhat better, not completely better, but somewhat better. East Pakistan time they had to flee for their lives. They sneaked into Tripura, then from Tripura they flew to West Bengal and then eventually they got admission in our college. By hearing, those people are eyewitnesses, by hearing the stuff from them, I started wondering, why does this history not get written? So I asked my parents. My parents were all both born in East Bengal. My parents were married in East Bengal also. So I asked my parents, why doesn't this get recorded? Why doesn't this get documented? They didn't have any good answer. Then I lost interest in this subject, but over the years, this this seed sprouted in my brain and eventually became a tree. And then it bothered me to such an extent that I left my job in the Indian Railway Service of Engineers and I joined politics. And the politics gave me the chance to study these things, to write. And that's why I have become, that's how and why I have become a history buff. But this question, the suggestion, that is a very good suggestion, but it must be sent to the ICHR. They are the correct people to do it.